I'll probably have to remake this video in multiple iterations, and that's totally fine. This concept is something that's always going through my mind because I deal with a lot of people who simply don't grasp this concept. And that is that a lot of people are doing too much difficult work, right? And they're not doing enough easy work. They're kind of just they're in the zone of the middle ground. And that what ultimately leads to them being beat up, right? So humans, we basically have like a bandwidth that we can kind of live in, right? Homeostasis is like almost not enough of a stimulus to change anything, right? If you're in homeostasis, you're just living life well, right? But then there's a zone where there's too much work, there's too much stress. And unfortunately, people kind of undulate between too little, too much. And sorry, my markers kind of suck, but they keep going back and forth through this too little, too much waves, right? So you get hurt, you go to not enough. You really rest. You go to get hurt again because you jump back into routines and progressions that are just frankly too much. And so the concept that I think is really important is the concept of the minimum effective dose, right? We're just going to shorten it as MED. And I am not the first person to talk about this. A lot of people have been talking about MED principles for a long time, but it's essentially trying to figure out what needs to be done to move you in the direction of where you want to go. And there's a ton of factors that are involved in that. Like, I don't think there's a perfect prescription for the minimum effective dose for somebody. I think you have to retest on a regular basis. Because some people like to train 5 times a week. And if you give them like hey, you need a 3-day split where you take breaks in between, that doesn't necessarily fit their preferences, and it might not fit like just their lifestyle and overarching goals. And to be honest, the gym is a really positive experience for people on a regular basis. And taking it away and saying you can only train 3 times a week isn't necessarily advantageous. It can be, but I mean, you look at athletes who are playing their sport, they're often training inside of the season or alongside their sport, and they're still performing decently well. And that's because I think enjoyment and preferences make a big deal in training, right? So, and that 3 days a week might be the move for certain people at certain stages of their life, even if they would ideally go to the gym 4+ times a week, right? Essentially, the MED concept, or the concept of minimum effective dose, is that there is a just right or just enough type of volume and intensity and overall arching program that's going to move you in the direction of your goals. And often, if you're patient and you're willing to play the MED game, you're going to get there, and you're not going to be as beat up. You're going to be able to perform, and you're going to get what you want out of training. And I think this is really important from thinking about things like a lot of things we do in the gym, we actually want to put a ton of mental intention into. And where people find themselves is they're trying to do too much all the time, and they're actually fatigued, and they can't actually do the training the way it's intended to work. And then it doesn't give them the results that it could, right? So a few simple things to think about when it comes to minimum effective dose are like, what is the stimulus you're trying to achieve, right? Think stimulate and not annihilate. When it comes to stuff like sprints, jumps, Olympic oriented work like power clean, snatch, the Olympic variations, like a lot of times for people using those as more like tools in their program, it doesn't take a giant dose of those things to have a positive effect. Same thing with like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy bench presses, that type of stuff. Depending on what you're trying to do, like you may not have to beat the crap out of yourself with intensity and volume. You might be able to, keep a session where it's very intensity oriented, and then have more of a volume day where you're focused on some speed and some technical development. There's a lot of ways to do this. And the point of this video is to not like go over all of them, but it's thinking about stimulating and not annihilating. And then what is essentially the least amount of work and I can do in any given session, and maybe even over the course of a week, to move me in the direction of my goals. When it comes to like just training concurrently or taking a vertical approach, which basically means we're not periodizing out linearly, we're trying to keep all the physical qualities in the program. I think minimum effective dose type of training is super effective because You can keep power in the program. You can keep speed work in the program. You can keep mobility and strength and pretty much every physical quality in the program. You just have to say like, hey, what's the minimum amount of work I can do to maintain cardiovascular fitness? And that might be one 20 to 30 minute zone 2 to 3 bike ride a week, right? To keep speed in the program, it might be one sprint session a week where you're trying to hit max velocities. To keep power in the program, it might be one like jumps and throws and Olympic barbell movements type of activity in the program. To keep hypertrophy in the program, it might mean one session of more bodybuilding-esque work. There's a lot of ways to do it, and you can probably get good results with a lot of these things. So don't overstimulate yourself, don't annihilate yourself. Try to think about using the minimum effective dose and riding the waves of test, retest, and just making sure your trajectory is in the direction you want to go. That's all I got for today. Appreciate it. Peace.